Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Global Wellness Institute Workplace Wellbeing Initiative Real Talk about how to address the emerging needs of today's workforce. Never have organizations been faced with the unprecedented challenges of burnout, employee disengagement with their work, and voluntary quit rates. Never have employees reported such low levels of happiness, dissatisfaction with their work, and feelings of loneliness and isolation. Welcome to this Workplace Wellbeing Real Talk hosted by the Global Wellness Institute. I'm Jessica Grossmeyer, a member of GWI's Workplace Wellbeing Initiative, and I'll be co-facilitating today's Real Talk with co-member Sylvia Greenlee. Sylvia, can you say a little more about why GWI's Workplace Wellbeing Initiative launched this Real Talk project?
Thanks, Jessica. Yes, our Workplace Wellbeing Real Talk series was developed in order to foster authentic dialogue around sensitive workplace issues and to help organizations understand the real stories behind the trends that we're seeing with various workplace-related reports. Our goal is really to humanize workplace well-being by sharing stories about real people and organizations. And so today we're going to have an authentic conversation about the need to humanize the workplace. We've got our global well-being experts from our initiative who are joining us today to discuss how we might enliven the spirit of our work lives and workplaces by sharing practical ways to foster higher levels of connections with ourselves, our coworkers, our work, and the world at large. And our aim is to help anyone leading well-being for their organizations, teams, and themselves to understand how we might take a whole person approach to well-being by addressing mind, body, and spirit.
Wow, thanks for that, Sylvia. I'm excited for today's conversation. This is going to be fabulous. So let's start today's conversation by giving each of our experts an opportunity to share a bit about themselves and the focus of their work. To make this easy, I'm going to call on each one of you and then have you go ahead and give your introduction. Jessica, let's start with you. Feel free to state your first and last name and share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with this group of people. It's incredible. My name is Jessica Tsigan, and I work primarily out of Stockholm, Sweden. But I do work across Europe and the US. I am American. And wow. To summarize what I do in a nutshell, so I primarily work in high-performing organizations, really supporting individuals from a coaching lens, and coaching through the space of well-being and performance. So helping individuals explore what that means for them, but then also management teams to say, how do we kind of start to shift our thinking in the ways of how we're kind of learning about ourselves and our needs? How can we then show up in our organizations and in our broader scope of influence to make something happen?
Terrific. Thanks for joining us, Jessica. Jocelyn, let's go to you next.
Thanks, Jessica. I'm Jocelyn Pepe, and I am located in just outside of Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. And I'm incredibly excited to be here today to join in this conversation around workplace well-being. To summarize a little bit about the work that we do a deep dive into human behavior and start at an individual level. We really feel that that's the foundation of all of our relationships and our overall well-being, because once we're connected and well within ourselves, we have that strong foundation, it impacts all relationships that we have. So starting at that level, and then it ripples into a team and across the organization. So working with teams, sort of similar to what Jessica was mentioning.
Great, thanks. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're going to round out the J's and go to John next.
Hey, Jessica. Great to be here. So my name's John Toomey, and I'm in Melbourne in Australia. And I've been in this space for a very long time, and I go into workplaces and deliver educational seminars on all manner of topics around human well-being and human thriving. I also write a lot of content, written books and ebooks and those sorts of things. And for the last several years, been specializing in heavy industries, so construction, mining, oil and gas, dealing with rooms full of big burly blokes.
Great. Thanks so much, John. I'm so excited to have your additional insight added. Sarah, let's move to you next.
Wonderful. It's so great to be here today. My name is Sarah Gravely, and I am located in Charleston, South Carolina. I work with companies really to create a culture of well-being, and doing that by empowering their teams to prioritize self-care and how to manage stress and cultivating like that emotional intelligence. I really focus on mindfulness, burnout prevention, work-life integration, and that emotional intelligence to provide solutions to the problems that these organizations are facing, and implementing strategies to thrive for their employees to thrive both personally and professionally.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Welcome to today's session. And Danielle, let's move to you.
Yes, hi. So thank you for including me in this as well. My name is Danielle Poza. I am a workplace wellbeing advisor. So I primarily work with executive teams to really help them create a workplace wellbeing, long-term workplace wellbeing strategy that's woven into their culture and the entire employee experience, so that it's not just a program or an initiative, but something that's really authentic and long lasting. And yeah, just excited to be here and to push the envelope of what workplace well-being means in this conversation.
So I opened our session talking about some of the pain points that individuals and organizations are finding themselves challenged with in this moment that beg for new approaches to workplace well-being. And I'd like a few of you to speak to the concerns you're seeing with your clients that will help us understand why it's time to expand our approach to well-being. Why are the traditional approaches to physical and mental well-being, which has been the focus for a lot of our initiatives, insufficient to meet these emerging needs in the workforce? Jocelyn, I believe you have a couple of examples of why a broader approach to well-being is needed. Can we start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So when thinking about the why behind a broader approach to well-being in the workplace, we started from a place of connection. And most recently in 2023, we've been working with organizational teams who are feeling and experiencing high levels of disconnection amongst one another. So when we think about humanity being disconnected in general right now, and then take it into the workplace, we're talking about things like isolation and loneliness and poor mental health, and how the stress of each individual person ripples throughout a team. And so from a behavioral perspective, when someone is stressed, our actions and impacts are different than if we're fully, wholly resourced. So with the teams that we have worked with specifically, there's a lot of blame or disconnect in us versus them. And so with organizations being pressed to innovate and adapt to meet the demands of the future of work, it adds an additional layer of stress on employees and on leaders. And what we're noticing is unintentionally people taking it out on each other and saying we're not connected, or we're not achieving the same vision, mission, or it's us and it's them and they're doing this and we're doing that. So those are the examples that we've been working with. So in these times of uncertainty, creating better connection amongst each individual within themselves, allowing them to understand their intentions and their impacts on one another, helps create that greater level of curiosity and self-awareness amongst a team. And then that impacts the entire team when we come together for half days or full days to resource everyone to have more impactful communication with one another. And we have seen incredibly positive results with this. And so when we talk about the pillars of well-being, from the impact stress has on us physically or mentally, emotionally and socially, individuals leave feeling with more tools and resources to get better connected to themselves and then with one another. And then, of course, as we know, that ripples into the organization and the bottom line. So that's a bit of the essence to the why that we've been seeing.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that perspective, Jocelyn. And, what you said reminded me of some research I came across that said when a single individual within a team is feeling lonely or isolated or disconnected, it impacts the performance of the whole team. And you just breathed life into that statistic for me. So thank you for sharing that. Jessica, given your experience of coaching hundreds of individuals in high-performing organizations, why is this important from an employee perspective, not just from a team and an organizational perspective?
Yeah. And I'm kind of inspired actually to answer both, if that's cool, because they're both so, it's an interesting dynamic because in these organizations, I'm constantly reminding people that management teams, that they're made up of people, of humans, right? And I think that's why this topic in general is so relevant to a lot of us, because we're really recognizing, like, what does it mean to actually show up thinking human centrically, as an individual, but then also as a manager, the responsibility that comes with, and the need and the desire for it. So from a management team perspective and what actually is impacting organizations that they can measure, we're asked to come in and kind of help them, think more holistically, because they're seeing that it impacts retention. And obviously that's really, really important in this climate, because the race for talent is so competitive and they want to hold on to the people that they worked so hard to source. And then the second most common thing I hear is actually burnout rates are not low and they're aware of that. And different countries, they measure it differently. So actually in Sweden, where I work, we measure burnout, and people actually have a strategic plan of how long an employee will leave if they leave for a diagnosis of burnout. So we can actually measure then the impact of the cost of this, right? So employers are recognizing the need to do things differently, and they have more, especially the heart-centered leaders actually now can have a more tangible source of information when they're making the case for bringing in more people and taking a different approach, because we can measure it. So I just wanted to share that piece. And then from the employees and the individuals that I coach, I would say a lost sense of connection, both to oneself and one's values and their purpose, and understanding what's important to them, and a connection to and a disconnected sense to their teams, whether it's because maybe they're new joiners and they came in through COVID and they worked, remotely, and now they're coming into an office and they're new and they're navigating, where there's a multi-factors at play, where people are kind of holding on to what they can see and focus on, which is usually their deliverables, their work, and they get kind of in this tunnel zone. And when they're there for too long, as many of us can probably relate to, when you have that tunnel vision, that's exactly when we're not sleeping well, our recovery is low, we can sense that we're running on stress hormones, but we don't know what to do because that's been our norm for so long. So in the coaching, I hear a lot of, this is the first time they're slowing down and having a space to talk and think and question, what's actually going on with me? What's going on with my well-being? What does my routine actually look like? I love when people stop and actually really have to think, when I ask the question, what do you do that positively impacts your well-being on a regular basis? Sometimes I do get blank stares, and it's not that they're not doing anything. They're just disconnected from kind of these behaviors that are almost not really conscious. It's just going through the motions. So I see a beautiful blend for this type of work now, with management teams getting more information and data to measure and put these kind of initiatives and strategies on the forefront, mixed with people actually asking for it.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. So I'm hearing a lot of concerns related to mental health coming up: stress, burnout, this feeling of disconnectedness, this feeling of overwhelm. Danielle, in your work, you talk about the distinction between the mind and the spirit or soul. And so, help us dig a little deeper into the distinction here, and why is this going beyond the traditional approach that we are seeing and have been seeing in mental health? Why is this important?
Yeah. So I feel like there's been this just such a interesting overall shift that's happened in this whole space of well-being in workplaces, in that it kind of started out as like physical well-being or physical wellness, and the conversation was mostly, in that domain, and not many people were even giving that much attention. And then COVID happened, and there was this elevated perspective to go from not just the physical, but then looking at all areas of well-being. And it seems like quite a few organizations are thinking in that direction now. But now, and to the point that everybody is kind of making about like this deeper inquiry that's been happening, where people are really demanding a sense of purpose in their workplace, or wanting to feel more connected, to one another, getting away from, not feeling that loneliness anymore, feeling more connected to themselves, or like Jessica said about aligning with values. That's been something I know that I've seen, a lot with clients, is that employees feeling like, well, it's just not aligning with my value system, especially the younger generations. And to me, that's kind of like it's kind of indicative that now we're moving beyond just like well-being and looking at the different elements of well-being to a more like, I would say, spiritual well-being. And when I say spiritual, back to your original question, it's like getting in touch with that deeper side of ourselves that is interested in purpose, is interested in connection. The challenge is, though, we hear like spiritual, it means so many things to different organizations and people, but I know when I'm saying it, what I mean is understanding that difference between operating just in that mental domain of trying to figure things out, get things done, kind of strategize your way through things, and kind of put the mind, like quiet the mind and go to a deeper place so that you can ask some of those deeper questions and get the answers, and those real answers, those answers to the questions about your purpose, or what matters to you, or what your values are. Though the answers to those questions come from, the soul. And that's a term that kind of like scares people, but, I did a lot of work with, Deepak Chopra over the course of, probably the last 10 years. And the way that he described it to me, which I feel like might resonate with people, especially who maybe don't use that word very often in their vocabulary, is that the soul is the real decision maker. That, your mind could be thinking about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, there's a voice that can override the thoughts. And that voice is the voice of the soul. And that's what's making the ultimate decisions, regardless of all the thoughts in your mind. So that, that to me is like, if we can evolve ourselves in workplaces to really enabling people to slow down, as we've been saying, and, get to that deeper place, that automatically creates a sense of connection with each other and ourselves. And to me, that's just like where we've got to kind of evolve the conversation, because all the issues that we're seeing in workplaces are issues of the mind, are issues of just trying to get through our to-do lists and our emails and all that kind of stuff. And that's not sustainable, as I think we're probably all seeing. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and for taking us a little bit deeper, Danielle, into how we haven't been meeting the needs of the emerging workforce, because we haven't really gone deep enough into sort of the seed of what makes each of us feel whole, and to get in touch with that. And I love what we've mentioned so far. We've been talking about the complexity of each of us as individuals coming together in teams, that making up an organization. So we're really talking about multiple levels of connection. And that's really what I heard in our comments thus far. So let's now turn our attention to the practical side. How do we address these emerging needs to help people deepen their connections with themselves, with their coworkers, with their work, and with the larger world around them? Sarah, let's start with you on this question. And I know that you do a lot of work with remote teams and with international teams. Can you help us understand how you are bringing these kinds of concepts and some practical suggestions into very complicated organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. Even just to pick up what, Danielle said, it's like when individuals connect with that larger sense of self and purpose and meaning, it's that they're going to be able to connect with their work and their personal lives and really become like more fulfilling and meaningful. And I do a lot of practical practices with groups and organizations in person and virtual teams and international teams kind of across different offices. And we really focus on mindfulness practices. So examples, meditation, breath work, and some other kind of areas that bring that and increase that self-awareness and the emotional regulations by allowing individuals to observe their thoughts and their feelings without judgment. We live in this world where multitasking is glorified, and actually it's doing us a disservice. So part of the mindfulness practice too is like slowing down to show up for yourself and show up for others. The practices, I'll kind of go in a little bit deeper and then give one of my favorites, but these practices can really too foster and facilitate that spiritual connection and exploration individually, and maybe even cross-functionally with other team members. And like I said, it leads to that greater fulfillment and happiness. And when you have that like improved self-connection, you're going to have better relationships with everybody along the way and within organizations. So I have had a couple of remote only organizations that I've worked with. And it's like, how in this new world, in this new work environment, do we build this connection and curiosity with individuals and groups? So for a couple of clients, and this is, a free little tidbit, feel free to adopt it in your day-to-day. We have created a meet us at the water cooler meeting on the calendar once a week. And it is a Zoom meeting where we come in and you can show up if you feel like it. You can, and if you can't, no worries, but it's a structured meeting of like a sharing. It's that option to really have that interpersonal connection with your team members, followed by a mindfulness practice. So that grounding experience, and doing that collaboratively and with a group really does foster this sense of connection when we're spread out all over. It has been a huge success. And we are now starting to foster it to where, there's not just one leader that will lead the examples. That we've changed it around to where different employees will show up with what they find is their deepening personal connection, that curiosity to adapt to and share with their other coworkers.
Oh, I love this. We're getting practical now. We're talking about what we can do to transform our workplace so we can build these connections. Jocelyn, what approaches have you used to help individuals transcend their busy minds and turn down the metaphorical noise to get more grounded? And what steps have you helped organizations to take to support that individual sense of presence, monotasking, and mental recovery?
First of all, with the mental noise, it's doing the work to have an understanding that it's there and that we have a choice with it. So the inner dialogue and understanding the voices that help us and support us in achieving our vision and staying connected to our values, or listening to the voice that is sabotaging us or keeping us small and in our comfort zone. So creating awareness to the inner dialogue, and we have an opportunity to choose what to listen to. And then so building on that concept, something that Danielle had started to talk about with the soul is we talk about it in terms of intuition. And when we're still and quiet, talking about intuition and checking in with our heart, our head, and our gut as energetic centers or brain cells in like the language of the science community is really important. And when we slow down enough, we can connect into what our intuition is telling us versus what our mind wants us to muscle into or muscle towards. So there's an energetic pull from that intuitive perspective versus a mental push. And so having those types of conversations at that individual level is how we support like the curiosity and compassion to move forward. And then taking that organizationally, we've worked with teams on mission, vision, and values at an individual level, and then taking it up into the organizational level or the team level. Because when individuals are clear on their values, and then the team gets to create their values together, there's cohesion. There's also like a sense of the connection that we're talking about. There's greater awareness to respect someone else's values and how they might want to be treated and how we like to be treated. And then taking that into the vision, when we have a clear vision ourselves, and then we can connect into a team vision or a corporate vision. There's just different layers. And then finally taking it up to the mission. When we have a purpose, it's also called, we have a direction on where to go, and we can feel into that and continue to move energetically towards the greater purpose. So individually and organizationally.
Wow, so many great things packed into that statement. And I love the intuitive pull versus the mental push. I'm going to be thinking about that for a bit now. Just what additional suggestions do you have for organizations and individuals in this work?
Yeah, and to build on all the incredible things being said, I think the first thing that comes to mind is recognizing what an organization actually provides its teammates nowadays, right? So the topics we've been talking around, having and finding your sense of purpose and really naming and claiming your values and learning how to slow down and get in tune with oneself. Where they do that in community and connection is not necessarily where it used to be in cultures before ours now. And for some of us, I mean, our workplace is where we feel or look for that sense of belonging and community and foster a curiosity there, because that's kind of what we can hold on to. And so I think as an organization, just recognizing, why is this spilling into the work? And maybe years past, it was very separate. It's the evolution of the time that we live in, and particularly, context to the country and maybe, the region that you're working in, this can be more or less relevant, but it is something that I see. And so taking that a step, once you recognize it and you see, understand the why this is happening, then I kind of jotted down something here that around language, how do we ask questions, right? So if you're a manager and you're leading a team and you have one-on-ones that are really strategic, throwing in some, what really motivates you? And this is my coach hat coming on, right? But why do you want what you want? What about that excites you? And kind of create the space for your teammates to kind of explore that, and creating a culture of letting that curiosity take up space. I think that can be a really intentional way and cost-free, so to say, other than kind of getting outside your comfort zone to connect with your team in maybe a deeper way and in a new way. And then I think the second point that I've seen in facilitation situations, so when we bring groups together and creating a space where peers can exchange information and share experiences together. So an example that comes to mind is I ran a peer exchange session. We didn't call it coaching because we wanted the leaders to learn from one another strictly around different topics of well-being. And what I found in the room is that what leaders could teach one another, just given the space to share, what challenges do you face? What stands in your way? What are your blockers? What works really well for you? What keeps you up at night? These really authentic, genuine conversations without any expectations or agenda. That's real connection, because that's vulnerable. Right? That is putting everything else aside and really learning about these shared human needs and questions that we all have. And when you, as a facilitator, you watch that, you're like, whoa, this is powerful. So I can't speak to how they interact with one another outside of that space, that room, but just watching it, I think that's also a very organic way to take ownership in the org, is creating that space for them to connect and share kind of how do you do it, and allow that understanding, that mutual understanding that you're working through these challenges together.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Jessica. And, one of the things that you said, I think is a good reminder for us, like, why is this now showing up in the workplace? Remembering that there has been a shift and some outlets that people used to have to meet some of these needs, they have shifted into the workplace. And so we need to take different approaches to that. Danielle, I'm wondering what ideas that you have about how we need as individuals and organizations to invest in making these connections happen. I mean, if we're talking about having more authentic conversations and slowing down the hustle a little bit so people can reflect, I mean, how are you bringing this into the clients you serve?
Yeah, so I think I think a big part of this is like really allocating investment dollars and time into people's human development. And I say like human development, not just like, training or upskilling, because I've seen, I want to say, I feel like across every organization that I've worked with, training basically getting cut, and then even if there is training, it's more of the same in terms of like training just to get the job done, training and just the skills that you need to produce more and do more and check off more off your to-do list. And there's less and less, at least in what I'm seeing, correct me if you guys see anything differently, but less and less in like real leadership development, real manager training that takes time, that takes days, that brings people together in a live setting so that they're not just watching a session distracted, on their computer doing something else the whole time. Like that's not like real kind of investment in people. And when you look at like the data and the research, some of the biggest drivers of engagement and retention are having opportunities to learn and grow in your job, right? So there's all different kinds of ways to learn and grow as a human being. But if we're talking about learning and growing in terms of that connection, understanding your purpose, those are like deeper ways of learning and growing. So to be more specific, like, I try to encourage all of my clients to move away from having one-off wellness sessions and just bringing in a speaker to do, a quick talk that, maybe kind of gives people a pep in their step for a day, but then doesn't have lasting impact. Instead of just having a session, really think about what does a well-being like curriculum look like for your organization, where employees feel like, oh, I have these ongoing opportunities to kind of, go deeper on a topic, go deeper on sense of purpose, go deeper on financial well-being, physical well-being, community well-being, in these different areas, and show that there's this well thought out plan that shows the employees like, I'm really investing in you as a person. And that to me is such a, like, that's a big step in the right direction for organizations. And I don't think there's enough of like really taking time for ourselves to do a course, a program, a self-development. I know John can speak to this, this stuff too, of like really investing in that level of work, doing that retreat, like blocking off a 4-day weekend to go do something in nature that really like invigorates your soul. Not where it's more like reactive methods where, oh, I'm going to see a therapist because I have to work through this super stressful situation this week, but like a proactive investment in ourselves that again takes time. So anyway, sorry, this is long-winded, but I guess my whole theme of this is that there needs to be a more serious investment in our, in our own kind of development in our soul from both a time and monetary perspective, both as individuals and in organizations.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Danielle. I appreciate that you're sharing the investment that you made in yourself. You know, a lot of people aren't even aware of what to invest in, right? Like if I know I need something, but I'm not even sure where to get it. And I think that's where the workplace can
so
really
true.
step up. You know, John, you work with a unique set of workers that have very unique, challenging situations. And I'd love for you to bring in how you're talking about this kind of work and how you've had to adapt it maybe to the unique environments that you serve.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Look, it's pretty amazing, really, when we look at this and finding our way forward to deliver a message that works for people. And I was reminded just recently that just 200 years ago, 98% of the people on this planet were poor. That's changed a little bit. And, you know, life back then and even not long ago demanded people's attention purely for survival. And attention is a really interesting place to go, because in the construction industry and the mining industry, if people haven't got their attention on what's going on, somebody can die. But, you know, attention, the work I did, you know, like Danielle, I invested a lot and I studied a lot of the work that Harry Palmer created. And two things, attention and will. They're both qualities of our deeper level of ourselves. They're not qualities of the mind. They're filtered by the mind or they're motivated by the mind, but they come from somewhere much more different. And what's happened in this modern world, because all of our needs are being met, there's nothing really demanding our attention. There's no sort of the people around us, nobody really needs our help. Everybody's surviving okay. And so people's attention is open to being seduced, or it ends up being directed back into their minds. And when people have got too much attention in their minds, they're overwhelmed by either fear of the future, or regret or resentment from something in the past, or they're sitting in crippling self-doubt, or they're doing a really good job of self-criticism. And so that can lead to an incredible level of self-absorption. And as soon as you spend too much time thinking about yourself, you can then go down that dark hole and become depressed. And, you know, you become very reactive and you can't really be present. So with the work that I'm doing with these people in construction and heavy industry, I'm talking to them about relearning how to gain deliberate control over their attention and waking up their will so that they can actually start to learn to put their attention out into the world. And when they become more deliberate with that, their minds start to quieten down. And it's so interesting what happens there, because then they get more access to what Jocelyn was saying before, that intuitive sense of what's going on around them. So it's really, you know, especially male-dominated workforces, they like it to be logical. And if you can put it in a way that they understand it and it sort of makes sense, then they naturally start to incorporate it into their lives. But it's the same goes for white-collar workers. That loss of deliberate control over our attention, that means people's attention's being seduced into everything from online shopping, social media, gambling, pornography, all the stuff that really leave us lost in our minds and close off that connection with who we really are.
Oh, I just love so many things about what you just shared, John. And, you know, this appreciation that some people think of, you know, when we're trying to tune in and quiet our mind, there can be this, well, we need to, you know, really tune in and get more inwardly focused. But you're reminding us that this is also about balancing that with attentiveness to the outward focus as well, and that there is a harmony that needs to happen. And I also love what you said about, you know, it's not just about tuning into the mind, but tuning into the heart, right? And so there are different ways we can attend and pay attention. So thank you for sharing that. Sylvia, now that we've discussed, you know, why we need to take a different approach than we've been taking in workplace well-being and how to do this in practical ways, can we circle back around again to the benefits to the individuals in the organization? Because some of this might sound, they might be thinking, well, this isn't really the space of the workplace now. Why is it? And so can you help bring us through that conversation, Sylvia?
Yeah, let's begin by discussing the benefits to employees and leaders when they gain a sense of connection with themselves and others. And Sarah, let's start with you.
Absolutely. Just going back on to some things that people said, I feel like human capital is the number one investment an organization can make into their company and into the results of their bottom line. A lot of people want to know what a return on investment is when they're starting these conversations of these employee well-being, employee engagement, this path of all the tips that we're sharing today. So it's really important to invest in that to create the container of psychological safety. When you create that container of psychological safety, it encourages vulnerability, and therefore it creates a stronger connection at work. And this leads to open communication. So when the employees feel more psychologically safe, they're more likely to speak up and share their thoughts and ideas openly. Better collaboration and innovation. This builds trust. So when individuals are vulnerable and they share their personal experiences, it can build trust within the teams. And it's that stronger relationship and the greater sense of support and belonging. And then finally, another point that I want to make, there's so many points, but I think this is really important. It fosters learning and growth. You know, when individuals feel psychologically safe and are willing to be vulnerable in a workplace environment, they are more likely to seek feedback and learn from their mistakes, to share their wins, to kind of acknowledge their challenges, which is only going to help the organization learn and grow. And I think it's just really important to highlight that, these are just simple things that can be done. It's part of the culture that leaders can, I always say that's top down, inside out. I mean, and for leaders to embody this and to lead this way, it really gives the employees the permission to share in ways that is going to help their improvement and of work. Which is also going to help their overall well-being. It's going to help their engagement. And really, sometimes the most important thing that organizations are looking at is how it's going to strengthen their bottom line.
Love that. I love the innovation, collaboration, better communication, and all of that translating to an environment where people are learning and growing. John, I know you touched a bit on the connection to mental health earlier, but would love to hear what the benefits are to employees and leaders when they have a deeper sense of connection. I hear a lot of corporations and companies having issues with their workforce dealing with mental health challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. Well, I think it's probably a good time to talk about a very powerful quality that I believe has an incredible impact right across the board, and that's care. And, you know, we keep getting a lesson about care because every time there's a disaster, a bushfire, a flood, or a major storm, which could be called a hurricane in some parts of the world, or it's called a typhoon in other parts of the world. Down here, we call it a cyclone. In the aftermath of those sorts of events, we see what happens to people. And, you know, I keep reminding the employers of construction workers that if something like that happened overnight, these are the people that would be out there on their knees in the mud working for 48 hours straight because they've got so much care in their hearts. People really do care. And it's such a powerful motivating force. And I think that this really takes us back to inspiration, because if people are not inspired, and really inspiration is something that comes from a deeper level of our being, whereas motivation is a mind thing. When people are inspired, magic can happen. And it was very interesting. I had a situation where I was facilitating a meeting for a paint company, and the room was full of white collar people. And we were talking about the stress and the pressure and the burnout in the place. And I just said to them, what do you guys do? And they looked at me blank. And eventually somebody said, we make paint. And I said, yeah, that's really boring. That's so boring. What do you do? And we did this discussion where I just kept asking the questions, and we went deeper and deeper and deeper. And eventually they landed in a place where somebody wrote it down that they create what families need to develop nurturing spaces in their homes where families can connect and thrive and find peace. And you should have seen that conference come to life, because it woke up something deeper in people that brought out their care. And from their care came a whole new level of creativity. And the really magical thing that it brought is it brought togetherness. And these people were now together. They were no longer competing with each other. So it's really cool when we can really wake up those deeper qualities within ourselves and within others, and remember that care is such a powerful driver of human endeavor.
I love that. I love how they were inspired by a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in kind of what they were doing with their paint. Let's go to Danielle. I know you bring a lot of workshops to leaders around workplace well-being. Can you share a bit about your experience and how leaders have actually benefited from your approach?
Yeah, sure. So I think, like, a high level, like that deep sense of connection, like it's interesting because I feel like a lot of the time when it comes to like leaders or senior level executives, we're trying to, and myself included, kind of convince them of the benefits of all aspects of well-being with the business case, and being like, here's why it's good for retention, here's why it's good for productivity, and all of these key performance metrics. But the part that I also like to make sure that we include is that a key benefit is that you get to, for a leader, is like really, build a legacy, really, feel proud of the organization that you've developed, feel proud of the way that you've served your people, whether that's your employees or your customers. And, I'll share, like, in 2016, Deepak Chopra and I created this course called Workplace Wellbeing and the Soul of Leadership. And in 26, I mentioned that year because that was even at that point, like, workplace well-being was definitely not where it is right now, so it was a fairly forward-thinking topic. And then combine that with the soul of leadership, it was kind of a double whammy. And the whole idea of that, it was a one-day, full day workshop. And the way that we set it up was in the first part of the day, Deepak took the group through 30 minutes of meditation, right? So 30 minutes for people today, like, seems, crazy, but they loved it. And during those 30 minutes, it was a guided meditation by Deepak, and he asked a series of questions like, why are you a leader? What is the purpose of your leadership? What is the legacy that you want to leave? And then following that meditation, we went through this is an exercise that Deepak has done many times called building your soul profile. So then asking your soul a set of questions. It's really just deep questions, kind of expanding on that, expanding on what your leadership is about, what is the mission of your organization, what do you want to be remembered by? So it's a whole series of these questions. And that was what prefaced all of the conversation on all of the content on workplace well-being, because our whole thing was that if you get really grounded in your intention as a leader, and you really come from a place of the soul, now when you're thinking about your employees and your employees' well-being, it feels a little bit more like your real responsibility if you're a leader in the most authentic sense of the word. So, I think there's kind of this deeper benefit, right, that we don't always talk about, which is just like feeling proud that you lived, a great life and had a lasting impact. And that isn't, I don't think it gets touched on enough. And if you see like any, like research on people who are on their deathbeds, like some of the most common things people say is that they didn't lead a life that was true to themselves. And that basically is what everything we're talking about today is, like, how do we just feel like we are in alignment with our deepest self? And that's really, I think the impact of all of this is that we have that sense of connection, and we can feel, proud at the end of our lives. So yeah, but I can't say enough about how important it is that this starts at our most senior level leaders, because when we shift the way that leaders are thinking, we shift the decisions that they make, on behalf of all of their people, and then you have a huge impact on the lives of employees.
Now, what a powerful question for leaders to ponder. What is the lasting impact that they want to have?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So let's shift now to the benefits to organizations as a whole when employees, leaders, and teams build stronger connections at these levels. Jocelyn, let's start with you. What are the benefits of team performance?
Yeah, I want to take a minute and double click on a few things that have been said here with John and Danielle about so what I wanted to talk about was the ripple effect. And I think they both started to segue into energetically, when we take care of ourselves, we can take better care of others. And so that ripple effect, from what John was saying, being careful about how much of the inner time we're spending and how much we want to put out and be in service of other people and the legacy that they leave. The ripple effect on team performance is huge. And I've experienced it time and again in the teams that we work with. I'm working with a senior leadership team. And this highlights too what Danielle was saying about the importance of having this come from the top down, so we can do bottom up work and top down work. And some of the examples right now is senior level leadership, including a CEO, disconnected through the work that they're doing. The ripple effect individually on each other, because there's perspective shifts, there's changes in how they communicate and look at one another. There's less of the negative and more of the lifting another person up to their strengths, to help them see what they're doing well, for acknowledgement and really appreciating another. And all it takes is a few simple words to appreciate someone for who they are versus what they do. So appreciating them for their care, for their dedication, for their commitment. And I get so passionate about this because the power in it is the impact on team performance. It has such a huge focus. So one person, one kind act, one ripple of connection at a time, I'm watching it happen organizationally, and the experience that it then has is in the team, employees feel like they're cared for. They feel like the organization cares for them. It ripples into cross-functional teams, and then it ripples into client relationships. So when we're talking about the benefits to team performance, it actually goes further than that and goes into the benefits to the organization and what can be felt at the end user when an organization in itself is operating at this genuinely caring place.
Love that visual of a ripple effect. Jessica, anything else you would add about the benefits to organizations when they build stronger connection at these levels?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only piece I would like to add really is the word trust. And I think that speaks so much volumes, right? I mean, we interact with so many people, and both internal, and I love the lens of clients as well, right? Like why a business exists and companies exist is to serve some entity of people, right? And to do that at our best, I mean, trust is such a foundational value, really. And if it's not there because we are disconnected, then or we can't really show up in alignment with who we are and stand for what we believe in and feel that in others, that authenticity. Without trust, I don't think that we can perform our best, right? There's that fundamental thing kind of standing in our way. So I would say that. And then I just want to highlight one of the points Danielle made earlier, because I think it really touches one of my hypotheses as I'm working with more and more people on a one-to-one basis is, why does burnout actually happen? And I really deeply feel, and I'm observing more and more, that when you're not living in alignment with your values, that you totally miss the markers, whether it's mental signals, whether it's body signals. You lose that connection to what's really important to you. You're not spending time on what's important to you, and that resistance comes in and day out. And I really think that is a huge driver of burnout. And by talking about this in a way that is more open and allowing people to explore, I think that, that definitely has a ripple into team dynamics and how we show up every day in our workplaces to serve.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Jessica, I'm going to hand it back over to you in the interest of time to wrap us up.
Yeah, such a fabulous discussion. I've just gotten so much out of what you've all shared. So thank you, Sylvia, for leading us through those additional questions. And I do feel like we're just getting to the tip of the iceberg, but we want to keep this at less than an hour. So I'm going to do a lightning round and have each person just speak to one closing thought that they would share just to encapsulate and put a point on our comments today. And we're going to go back to you, Jessica, to start our lightning round close.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Ask yourself your why, and let that take your time in stillness to find that answer, and then do your best to find ways to live in alignment with that why.
Thanks, Jess. Danielle.
Yeah, well, I'll just build on what Jessica said, which is to, you maybe meditate on your why, and really, I'm a big believer in a meditation practice, because it's one of the ways that we can kind of get to that deeper place on a regular basis. And then the second thing I would say is slow down. I feel like if everybody said that, I think on this call in the comments, and there's just a real peace in just telling yourself it's okay to slow down, to just take my time with this one task, to eat slowly, to talk to somebody without rushing, but just slow down. I have that on a Post-it on my computer screen. Yeah, so those are my last thoughts.
Thanks for sharing those, Danielle. Jocelyn.
Yeah, I think my final thoughts to bring in something a little bit different is take responsibility. So a lot through our conversations today, we've talked about the responsibility to check our impact, to do the work, to heal, to check our biases. And when we take that personal responsibility and ask ourselves the question, how am I contributing to this situation, or what is my impact right now? We can then get clear on how we are in service of other people or not. So that would be my bottom line.
Thanks for sharing that. And Sarah.
I think yes to ditto to everything everybody said. One big practice that I've been implementing right now, and I've been encouraging other people, is to listen more and speak less, and really be mindful with the communication. We live in a world that is extremely diverse, and we have multiple belief systems, and really being curious and open to learning, and being compassionate about every individual person's journey, because what my journey that I've been on is so completely different than everybody else's journey. So I've been shifting my language too. And so I've been removing the either or, the, limiting beliefs of the no and the but, and really incorporating the yes and into my communication. It's more of a, hey, I acknowledge yours and here's my perspective. And I've found that that's been a beautiful way for me to kind of really reset into my own personal beliefs, but then learning about others as well.
Great. Thank you for that, Sarah. John, we're going to close with you and give you the final word as we wrap up our Real Talk.
Yeah, so many great points there, Jessica. Thank you. And I feel that my last perspective is getting back to deliberately practicing virtues. Our kindness is one of the most powerful tools we have to connect with others. And there's so many virtues that perhaps we've forgotten in this modern world. And there's a couple that I want to highlight. One is gratitude. We forget how good we've got it. And sitting down on a daily basis to just write a gratitude journal is an incredibly powerful thing to do to help somebody ground themselves and become recentered and ease the burdens of their mind. And the second one, I want to share an exercise with everybody. This is a compassion exercise created by Harry Palmer in his Avatar courses. And notice when you do this exercise, it's a non-verbal exercise. The expected result of doing the exercise is a personal sense of peace. And there's 5 steps. So I'm going to ask you to choose somebody in your life who you'd like to feel more connected to. It could be a family member, a colleague, it could be somebody you have a disagreement with. And just take that person and place your attention on them. 5 steps, non-verbal. You just repeat these steps to yourself. Step 1, with attention on the person, repeat to yourself, just like me, this person is seeking some happiness for his or her life. With attention on the person, repeat to yourself, just like me, this person is trying to avoid suffering in his or her life. With attention on the person, repeat to yourself, just like me, this person has known sadness, loneliness, and despair. With attention on the person, repeat to yourself, just like me, this person is seeking to fulfill his or her needs. And with attention on the person, repeat to yourself, just like me, this person is learning about life. And just notice how you feel right now. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, John, for giving us a taste of what it's like to incorporate these practices. Yes, we can do the retreat. It's good to do that time, but this is really the work of moments that we weave into our days. So I just appreciate the perspectives that everybody here has shared. Thank you to all of you. You are experts in what you do, and our Real Talk listeners are just going to really appreciate all of these great examples you've given us on how to do this work in the world to meet broader and deeper needs than we've been meeting in the past. Sylvia, can you share with listeners how they can follow this project as we continue to develop future Real Talks?
Yes, please follow us on our Workplace Wellbeing Initiative LinkedIn page, where you'll be able to learn more about our Workplace Wellbeing Initiative. You'll be able to access past Real Talks, as well as additional workplace wellbeing resources, including standards and more. So we invite you to stay connected with us, and we're so thankful that you've joined us today.
Great. Thanks for that wrap up, Sylvia. Thank you for all of us for joining us. And this concludes our Real Talk.